Attorney Victoria Sterling wasn't just booking a business class seat that day on American Airlines Flight 892, but when crew questioned her legal threats about discrimination, 156 passengers discovered something that would reshape corporate legal accountability forever. Attorney Victoria Sterling approached the American Airlines check-in counter at JFK with the confident professionalism of someone who had spent 16 years rising to General Counsel and Executive Vice President of Legal Affairs at American Airlines. Her expertise in aviation law and corporate governance had protected the company from billions in legal liability while establishing industry-standard compliance programs. At 43, she carried the intellectual authority from earning her Columbia Law School JD with highest honors and overseeing a legal department of over 200 attorneys. Her credentials included membership in the American Bar Association's Aviation Law Committee and board positions with aviation industry councils, establishing her as a leading authority on airline regulatory compliance with direct responsibility for all legal aspects of operations. Today's personal travel to Los Angeles for a family visit had her traveling incognito in casual business attire rather than her usual executive suits. Her understated black blazer reflected her preference for privacy during off-duty travel, experiencing airline services from a passenger perspective. Customer service representative Jennifer Walsh, with 4 years of airline experience, had developed assumptions about passenger capabilities based on superficial observations. Walsh observed Victoria's approach without recognizing the legal expertise and executive authority of someone who regularly made decisions affecting airline policies. Walsh's limited understanding of corporate structure and tendency to judge by appearance led her to categorize Victoria as an ordinary passenger despite the legal mindset she maintained. As Victoria approached with her business class reservation clearly indicated in the system, Representative Walsh immediately demonstrated discriminatory service patterns that had become embedded despite comprehensive diversity training and corporate policies prohibiting such treatment. "I'm sorry, but I need to verify that this business class reservation actually belongs to you," Walsh stated with obvious skepticism while examining Victoria's identification. Business class seating requires appropriate documentation and verification of payment authorization. Victoria immediately recognized the discriminatory approach and clear violation of company policies she had personally helped develop. Understanding this represented exactly the type of practices that could result in significant legal liability under federal civil rights legislation. "I have my confirmation number, identification, and credit card used for payment," Victoria replied professionally, while observing the systematic discriminatory treatment. "What specific company policy requires additional verification beyond standard identification and reservation confirmation?" Walsh continued with additional verification requirements that clearly exceeded standard procedures and demonstrated racial profiling that Victoria had worked to eliminate through comprehensive legal policies. "Ma'am, I need to contact management for verification because it doesn't seem consistent with your profile," Walsh explained with obvious bias, violating established policies and federal regulations. Business class passengers typically have different demographics and presentations that require verification procedures. Victoria observed Walsh's escalating behavior with growing legal concern. Understanding the situation constituted discriminatory practices that could result in federal litigation and significant liability for American Airlines. "Representative Walsh," she said, reading the name tag, "I believe your procedures violate anti-discrimination policies and federal civil rights regulations. I'm requesting immediate supervisor intervention and documentation of this treatment for potential legal action." Her legal knowledge should have alerted any trained employee they were dealing with, someone possessing advanced legal expertise. As Walsh's discriminatory treatment continued with additional verification requirements violating company policies, Victoria persisted in her legal assertions while requesting management intervention to address the systematic discriminatory practices. I am formally documenting this discriminatory treatment and requesting immediate management review of these civil rights violations, Victoria stated with legal authority that should have established her familiarity with airline policies and regulatory compliance. Your procedures exceed standard policies and constitute discriminatory treatment based on racial profiling that violates federal civil rights legislation and could result in significant liability for American Airlines. Walsh responded with increased resistance, interpreting Victoria's knowledge of civil rights law as inappropriate passenger behavior rather than recognizing obvious legal education and expertise. Ma'am, I don't appreciate passengers trying to lecture me about company policies or legal procedures, Walsh replied with hostility. I'm following appropriate verification procedures, and threatening legal action doesn't change our security requirements. Other passengers began witnessing the developing discrimination as Victoria's legitimate business class reservation was subjected to excessive verification requirements that clearly demonstrated racial profiling. Among the observers were business travelers and legal professionals who recognized the discriminatory nature of Walsh's procedures and began expressing concern about the civil rights violations. Customer Service Supervisor Maria Rodriguez, monitoring the situation and becoming concerned about the discriminatory treatment and legal implications, finally approached with growing awareness of the violations occurring. Representative Walsh, what is the specific reason for these additional verification procedures? Rodriguez asked, with supervisory authority. Our standard policies require only identification and reservation confirmation for business class check-in. Walsh attempted to justify her discriminatory treatment with explanations that revealed systematic racial profiling and violation of anti-discrimination policies Victoria had personally helped develop. Supervisor Rodriguez immediately recognized the discriminatory nature of Walsh's procedures and clear violation of American Airlines policies prohibiting such treatment. Understanding the situation represented civil rights violations that could result in federal litigation and significant liability. Representative Walsh, these procedures clearly exceed our standard policies and constitute discriminatory treatment, Rodriguez stated with supervisory authority. Business class passengers require only standard identification and reservation confirmation. Process this passenger's check-in according to established procedures. Victoria observed the intervention with professional satisfaction while continuing to document the discriminatory treatment for potential legal action. Supervisor Rodriguez, I appreciate your intervention, but this discriminatory treatment represents systematic policy violations requiring comprehensive documentation and legal review, Victoria explained with legal authority. I will be pursuing formal civil rights complaints and internal policy enforcement to eliminate such discriminatory practices from American Airlines operations. Rodriguez attempted to address the situation through immediate policy correction, while growing concerned about the legal implications her employees' conduct had created. Ma'am, I sincerely apologize for the inappropriate procedures and discriminatory treatment you have experienced, Rodriguez said with obvious concern about legal consequences. We will immediately process your check-in and ensure corrective measures are implemented. More passengers witnessed the discrimination while expressing concern about the systematic nature of the treatment and the airline's apparent failure to properly train employees in anti-discrimination policies. Business traveler James Patterson, an employment attorney observing the situation with professional concern, approached the counter to provide legal support. "I'm an attorney specializing in employment discrimination," Patterson announced with professional authority. "I've witnessed systematic discriminatory treatment that clearly violates federal civil rights regulations and company policies, and I'm prepared to provide legal testimony regarding these violations." His legal intervention created additional pressure for immediate policy correction while documenting the systematic discrimination. As the discriminatory treatment continued with multiple witnesses and clear documentation of civil rights violations, Victoria maintained her legal focus while preparing for formal complaints necessary to address systematic discrimination and ensure corporate accountability. "I am documenting these civil rights violations for formal complaint filing with the Department of Transportation, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and Internal American Airlines Legal Department," Victoria announced with legal authority, demonstrating her comprehensive understanding of regulatory compliance and enforcement mechanisms. This discriminatory treatment represents systematic policy failures requiring immediate corrective action and comprehensive employee training to ensure compliance with federal anti-discrimination regulations. Rodriguez recognized the serious legal implications, understanding that formal complaints and regulatory investigations could result in significant financial penalties and reputational damage if not properly addressed through immediate corrective measures. "We are committed to addressing these policy violations through immediate corrective action and comprehensive review of our customer service procedures," Rodriguez stated with growing legal awareness. "Please allow us to provide appropriate service recovery and ensure your travel experience meets the standards American Airlines maintains for all passengers." Victoria continued her documentation while observing the corporate response being implemented. "While I appreciate the immediate service recovery efforts, this situation requires comprehensive legal review and systematic policy enforcement to ensure discriminatory practices are eliminated," Victoria explained with legal expertise. "The systematic nature indicates institutional problems requiring executive-level intervention and comprehensive compliance reform." Attorney Patterson continued his documentation while supporting Victoria's assertions and preparing for regulatory complaints that would inevitably result from such clear policy violations. "This represents a clear pattern of civil rights violations requiring immediate corporate accountability and comprehensive policy reform," Patterson announced. Airport Terminal Manager Lisa Chen, monitoring the situation from the Operations Center, finally approached with executive authority. Terminal Manager Chen immediately recognized the magnitude of civil rights violations and corporate liability created through systematic discriminatory treatment. Understanding the situation required immediate executive intervention and comprehensive damage control. "I am Lisa Chen, Terminal Manager for American Airlines Operations at JFK," she announced with executive authority. "I have been monitoring this situation and recognize the serious policy violations and discriminatory treatment that have occurred. I am implementing immediate corrective measures to address these civil rights violations." Victoria observed the executive intervention with professional interest while continuing her legal documentation and assessment of the corporate response, understanding that appropriate accountability required comprehensive reform and executive-level commitment to compliance. Manager Chen, "This discriminatory treatment represents systematic failures in employee training and policy enforcement requiring comprehensive corporate accountability," Victoria stated with legal authority. "I am preparing formal complaints with federal regulatory agencies and internal legal review to ensure such discrimination is eliminated through appropriate corrective measures and policy reform." Chen recognized the serious legal implications that formal complaints and federal investigations would create. Understanding that immediate corrective action and comprehensive policy enforcement were essential to prevent significant financial penalties and reputational damage. American Airlines is committed to eliminating discriminatory practices and ensuring equal treatment for all passengers, Chen replied with executive authority. We will conduct immediate investigation of this incident and implement comprehensive training and policy enforcement to prevent similar violations and ensure compliance with federal civil rights regulations. Victoria prepared to continue her documentation while accepting the immediate service recovery and corporate accountability measures being implemented. While I appreciate the executive intervention and commitment to policy reform, this situation will require ongoing legal oversight and regulatory compliance monitoring to ensure effective elimination of discriminatory practices, Victoria explained. I will be pursuing formal channels for accountability and systematic reform to prevent similar violations. Attorney Patterson continued his legal support while preparing for regulatory complaints that would ensure appropriate corporate accountability. This situation requires comprehensive legal accountability and regulatory oversight to ensure American Airlines implements effective anti-discrimination policies and employee training, Patterson announced. As the situation continued with executive intervention and corporate accountability measures being implemented to address the systematic discrimination, Victoria began revealing the depth of her legal expertise and familiarity with American Airlines policies that would soon transform everyone's understanding of her professional authority and corporate position. Manager Chen, I want to ensure you understand the comprehensive legal implications of this discriminatory treatment, Victoria stated with obvious legal authority, demonstrating advanced knowledge of aviation law and corporate policy requirements. These civil rights violations represent systematic failures in employee training and policy enforcement that I have personally worked to prevent through comprehensive legal programs and compliance initiatives. Chen observed Victoria's detailed knowledge of company policies with growing professional interest and awareness that she was dealing with someone whose legal expertise exceeded typical passenger knowledge of aviation regulations. Your knowledge of our policies and legal requirements is quite comprehensive, Chen replied with executive recognition and growing respect for Victoria's professional expertise. Are you perhaps an attorney specializing in aviation law or civil rights litigation with experience in airline industry regulations? Victoria smiled with professional satisfaction while preparing to reveal the corporate authority that would completely transform the situation and demonstrate the magnitude of policy failures that had occurred within her own company. I appreciate your recognition of my legal expertise, Victoria replied with growing authority. I believe this situation provides an excellent opportunity for comprehensive policy review and employee training that will benefit American Airlines operations and ensure appropriate civil rights compliance throughout the organization. Representative Walsh, observing the executive intervention and legal discussions with growing awareness of her policy violations, finally began to understand the serious consequences of her treatment of a passenger who clearly possessed exceptional legal knowledge. I'm beginning to realize that I may have made serious mistakes in my verification procedures and passenger treatment, Walsh said with obvious concern and growing awareness of potential consequences for her discriminatory conduct. Victoria maintained her professional composure while preparing for the revelation that would demonstrate the true scope of policy failures within American Airlines' corporate structure. As Terminal Manager Chen continued addressing the discrimination while implementing corporate accountability measures, Victoria began revealing her actual position within American Airlines' corporate hierarchy and the legal authority that made her the ultimate arbiter of company policies and civil rights compliance throughout the entire organization. Manager Chen, I think it's important for you to understand that my interest in this situation extends beyond personal civil rights violations, Victoria explained with increasing corporate authority. I have comprehensive responsibility for American Airlines policy development and legal compliance that makes this discriminatory treatment particularly concerning from an institutional perspective. Chen observed Victoria's corporate language and institutional knowledge with growing professional recognition that she was dealing with someone whose authority and expertise went far beyond typical legal knowledge or aviation industry experience. Your corporate perspective and institutional knowledge suggest that you may have professional experience with airline operations and policy development, Chen replied with executive interest and growing awareness of Victoria's potential corporate connection. Are you perhaps a consultant or legal advisor who has worked with American Airlines on policy development or compliance issues? Victoria prepared to reveal her actual corporate position and legal authority that would completely transform everyone's understanding of the situation and demonstrate the magnitude of institutional failures that had allowed such discriminatory treatment to occur within her own company. I appreciate your professional recognition, Victoria said, with growing corporate authority and executive confidence. I believe this situation demonstrates the importance of comprehensive employee training and policy enforcement that ensures appropriate treatment of all passengers and compliance with federal civil rights regulations. Representative Walsh watched the developing corporate discussion with increasing anxiety and awareness that her discriminatory treatment had been witnessed by someone with significant legal expertise and potential corporate authority within American Airlines organization. I'm becoming very concerned about the consequences of my actions and the policy violations that have occurred, Walsh said with obvious worry. Attorney Patterson observed the corporate dynamics and institutional knowledge that Victoria was demonstrating, while recognizing that the situation involved someone with exceptional authority and expertise within American Airlines' corporate structure. It's becoming clear that this situation involves someone with significant corporate authority and legal expertise within American Airlines, Patterson noted with professional observation. The moment Victoria revealed her actual identity as General Counsel and Executive Vice President of Legal Affairs for American Airlines, the extraordinary scope of her corporate authority became undeniably apparent to everyone involved as they recognized that the discriminatory treatment had been directed against the chief legal officer who was responsible for developing and enforcing the very anti-discrimination policies that had been systematically violated during the check-in process. Manager Chen, Representative Walsh, and everyone present, Victoria announced with full corporate authority, I am Victoria Sterling, General Counsel and Executive Vice President of Legal Affairs for American Airlines, with comprehensive responsibility for all legal matters, policy development, and civil rights compliance throughout our organization. The revelation created immediate shock and institutional recognition among all American Airlines employees who understood that they had been subjecting their own chief legal officer to discriminatory treatment and policy violations that she had personally worked to prevent through comprehensive legal programs and employee training initiatives. Terminal Manager Chen stood frozen with complete professional devastation as she realized that the discriminatory treatment and corporate policy failures had been witnessed and experienced by the executive responsible for all legal oversight and corporate compliance within American Airlines. Ms. Sterling, I am profoundly embarrassed and concerned about the institutional failures and discriminatory treatment that you have experienced within our own organization, Chen said, with executive remorse and corporate accountability. This situation represents exactly the type of policy violations and discriminatory practices that your legal department has worked to eliminate through comprehensive training and compliance programs. Representative Walsh realized with complete professional horror that her discriminatory conduct had been directed against the General Counsel, who was responsible for employee discipline and corporate legal oversight. Understanding that her actions represented career-ending violations of the policies and training that Victoria's legal department had provided. Ms. Sterling, I cannot express how sorry I am for my discriminatory treatment and complete failure to follow the policies and training that your department provided, Walsh said, with obvious fear and professional remorse. I understand the serious consequences of my actions and the violation of everything that American Airlines represents regarding equal treatment and civil rights compliance. Victoria maintained her executive composure while addressing the systematic institutional problems that the incident had revealed within American Airlines operations and employee compliance. This situation demonstrates that despite comprehensive legal programs and training initiatives, we still have systematic problems with policy implementation and civil rights compliance that require immediate attention and comprehensive reform, she explained with corporate authority. This is why truth always comes to light, and justice always finds its way. If this story shows you that dignity and respect matter more than assumptions, make sure you subscribe to see more stories where justice prevails. Because when we stand together against discrimination, we make real change happen. Following the extraordinary revelation and demonstration of how discriminatory practices could occur even within companies that had comprehensive anti-discrimination policies and legal oversight, American Airlines immediately initiated sweeping reforms to employee training programs, customer service protocols, and civil rights compliance monitoring that would ensure systematic elimination of discriminatory practices and comprehensive accountability for policy violations throughout the organization. Representative Walsh was immediately suspended pending investigation and faced potential termination for her discriminatory conduct and violation of company policies that Victoria's legal department had specifically designed to prevent such treatment, while all customer service personnel were required to complete enhanced diversity training and civil rights education that emphasized zero tolerance for discriminatory practices, regardless of passenger demographics. The incident became a catalyst for aviation industry discussions about institutional discrimination and the importance of comprehensive policy enforcement that extended beyond training programs to include systematic monitoring and accountability measures that would ensure actual compliance with civil rights regulations throughout airline operations. Victoria's experience became a model for effective corporate legal oversight and institutional accountability as her response to the discrimination was incorporated into American Airlines training programs and policy enforcement mechanisms, inspiring other airlines to strengthen their civil rights compliance and employee accountability systems. Within weeks of the incident, American Airlines had implemented new monitoring systems and accountability measures that would prevent similar discrimination and ensure appropriate recognition of passenger rights regardless of demographic characteristics, while establishing Victoria's legal department as industry leader in civil rights compliance and anti-discrimination policy development. The transformation extended beyond individual airline policies to influence broader conversations about institutional discrimination in corporate America and the critical importance of comprehensive legal oversight that ensured actual policy implementation rather than mere policy development and training programs that failed to eliminate discriminatory practices. Civil rights organizations and corporate legal departments recognized the incident as a powerful example of how discrimination could persist despite comprehensive policies and used Victoria's experience to develop enhanced accountability measures and monitoring systems that would ensure effective elimination of discriminatory practices through systematic oversight and enforcement. Victoria's story became an inspiring example of how legal expertise and corporate authority could create positive institutional change, while demonstrating the ongoing importance of civil rights vigilance and comprehensive policy enforcement that protected all individuals from discriminatory treatment, regardless of their position or authority within corporate hierarchies. The lasting impact extended far beyond American Airlines to influence how corporations approached civil rights compliance and employee accountability, with Victoria's legal framework becoming a model for effective anti-discrimination policy development and enforcement that ensured actual protection of civil rights through systematic monitoring and comprehensive accountability measures. But Victoria's story is just one example of how corporate accountability meets personal discrimination. Next video. Watch what happens when a black district attorney's 18-year secret is revealed during airport police misconduct. When officers question her prosecutorial authority, the most shocking law enforcement credentials in justice history emerge. You won't believe what happens when prosecutorial power meets police bias. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and turn on notifications for new content. Don't forget to hit the like button if this story moved you, and share your thoughts and opinions about this situation in the comments below.